Next, we're going to do a doubling method with considering a space in between evenly. So we're going to take some boxcars, for instance, on a train or something like that, where we have a rectangular box by a particular space between the next rectangular box, and then those same boxes and spaces are repeated over and over again with a quick reference point method, as well as using the xing and halving and doubling method. So it's both using a physical reference point on the face of the objects with a line, as well as halving and doubling with xing. Okay, so let's give it a try here. We're going to do the flat space idea of it. So I'm just going to represent here the space in which my line of objects will go. And I'm going to just pretend here that we have random space here. It's going to be like a boxcar, about that long. Then there's going to be a little space in between like this. And I'll go ahead with my kneaded eraser and actually lighten up the space in between so we get the idea that that's going to be a space in between. We're going to consider the boxcar and the space in between as one total length of a shape. So I'm going to go ahead and make an X. Remember, I'm not Xing the box only, I'm Xing the entire shape created by the box and its space to the next box. Okay. That's also the same way as you just by Xing the box give me a halfway point down. So look at that. And drive my down the middle like that. Okay, so as a reminder, I've gotten this by Xing off the total of the shape of the box or the boxcar and the space in between to the next wall of the next boxcar. I've considered that my entire shape, and then I've X'd that off to get the center. What I'm going to take note of here in red is where this X shape hits the side plane of the back of my box. I'm going to call that a reference point. And I'm going to drive a red line horizontally back to take note of that space and space like that. All right? Then I'm going to continue because I want to create another space of this boxcar plus its counterpoint, or counterpart I should say, space, box, space, next box, next space. So I'm going to, again, I'm considering the box and the space as a whole shape. So therefore I'm going to put my Xing point here so that when I take this entire box from here and this entire negative space and come through here, I'm going to create, again, this space from the box and the space here again for the box and the space again. So I'll carefully go through there. So that red mark represents both the space and the box. So I'm going to make a horizontal now for the ending of that combined space. So technically that would be beginning of the third car, which we'll keep drawing out if we have to. And now I'm going to still put a diagonal through the space that now represents this entire space of the boxcar and its space. Very carefully, put down the X like this. I already have my center here of that entire space like I did here now, because I already had the middle line and went diagonally. The other point of interest is in the same way this diagonal in the first box struck the side of the back of the boxcar the first time, continuing on its way here for the entire shape, I'm going to make a note of that. I'm going to make a note of it again there. Right there. And that gives me the back of the second boxcar, followed by the space, which makes the total of the second shape. So again, I'm considering the boxcar and the negative space between it and the next boxcar a total shape. So there's my boxcar end again. And I'll take my kneaded eraser again and remind us that this is a little lighter because it's a negative space between the boxes. I'll go ahead and then take my T-square and create a third boxcar and lengthen this and do the same thing again. I'm going to consider the entire length of the second boxcar and the space in between as a shape. Therefore, I'm going to put my mark here on the plane. So I'm going to come back from the beginning of that second shape, including the boxcar and the space. I'm going to come back from the beginning, go through there to get a third markation of another boxcar and another space. Let me make that a little longer so I can put an arrow on it. I should have done that the last time. I apologize for not being thorough. Okay, and this, of course, would have done the same for okay, let me just make sure I clean that up. Okay, making sure everything's tidy here. Notice these are parallel. Okay, so I've taken the second shape, the start of the second shape, which is actually the boxcar and the negative space. I've taken that and considered it from front top corner over to the left, through the halfway point, coming down, makes another complete shape, which includes the next boxcar and its negative space, to the fourth boxcar. I'll go ahead, mark that off. And as I did before, I will go ahead and put a diagonal from the top right to the bottom left, like I did here to get that mark, which is the halfway mark of the total shape. But now, again, where that diagonal hits the red line I originally put my original reference point from, I get my second RP2, and again, I get my RP3, which becomes the end of my third boxcar and its counterpart negative space to the fourth boxcar. So I'll go ahead and lightly erase that line again so we get the idea that, oh, that's right, those are actually negative spaces. And we'd continue the process to the next boxcar and repeat and repeat and repeat. We can do the same thing in perspective. So 3 is all I need to show you the method. We have the original boxcar, so we'll say original boxcar plus space. So that's the total shape. So what I'll do, I'll just remind you that we considered this entire idea, the space. So in blue, I'll lightly shade in our first idea, not to cover up our work, but just to remind us that we're considering the boxcar and its counterpart space between it and the other shape. So it's actually this whole thing, even though boxcar is darker, I'll kind of make it grade 8 like this back. So the idea, we're taking the whole. So again, I don't have much room up here, so I just wanted to make, this is the entire shape. We then X'd off that entire shape from here to here, considering it the corner. So I'll put those in blue. That's the entire first shape. got the middle line, drove it back, X'd it off, and where that second diagonal hit the side of where I wanted the back of the first boxcar, I made a reference point. So I took that shape again with the half point, came through here, through the halfway point, doubled it. So now I have double that shape again. I want to make it clear that from there to here is the new space. Did the same thing, made the reference point when I struck back the diagonal. I continued on and considered this entire thing again, the third actual shape. So when I drove back again through the halfway, creating the space, that diagonal again struck a third reference point, which is right here. So again, by repeating this process over and over again, it's a pretty quick way, once you kind of understand the logic, without having to draw a ton of lines on the ground or a ton of reference points. It's actually pretty easy. All you're doing is considering the rectangular box and the negative space as one shape. As long as the boxes or the car shapes or the objects that you create kind of a rectangular plane around, they could even be standing, columns or whatever. This could represent the negative space of arched columns and its pillar, negative space pillar, negative space pillar. The idea is any space that works like this that you could reference with standing rectangles easily, or sitting for that matter. The idea would be it's a fast way to reference the actual space and automatically carry along its negative space, or in the case of arches, it would be negative space, pillar, negative space, pillar, negative space, pillar. In this case, it's boxcar, empty space, boxcar, empty space. As long as those objects and the spaces between them are even, you can consider the space and the object as one object. Then with a diagonal, you simply make these references, and each time you strike that reference, you know where to draw the end of the first shape, the second shape, the end of the third shape. So the object of the reference point is to markate this. Then when I do the whole shape again from here, go across and double it, put the diagonal through to the corner, this diagonal, I strike here again. That gives me the end of the second car. And I do the same process again, take the diagonal across, it strikes. Where it strikes is where I got this line. So the reference point has to come first before you're able to get the back of the second car, before you're able, actually that's not true. We created the first boxcar in the space. I should say correctly, in order then to double back the entire space, you get the first entire space first. Then by putting the diagonal in and striking against the red line, you get the end of the second boxcar. And again, creating the third space, considering the whole thing a third space, putting the diagonal in, and where it strikes the red line again, that diagonal is where the reference point is. The reference point gives you the back of the third boxcar again. And that's the order. So you have to practice this. It's a little confusing, but ultimately, instead of writing a dissertation on it, like 50 pages, which if you had to try to send an email of this, it would be a nightmare, right? The idea is by drawing it out slowly and repeating the lecture and simply pausing, reversing, pausing, you'll get this. But it's a great way when you eventually get going on, again, either empty space pillar, empty space pillar, empty space pillar, or object, empty space, object, empty space, object, empty space. Either way, it's a fast way to reference many, many of those back in space. And after you've created the first shape that you think looks correct, you can do a whole row of windows on a building this way. You can, a whole bunch of stuff that you don't have to, actually measure it out or count it out and hope you're kind of right. Or even using a measuring line and measuring the entire thing out. I find this reference method fairly quick when you apply it in different situations. Okay, so that's the flat work. So just to remind us again, we consider the entire rectangular shape and then cut in by a diagonal to get the box of the car. The first car was made up with the shape first. We have to establish the first box and space first. Then the second comes with the reference point method, draw. Third, by halving and doubling, we go ahead. So we're still using the X method and doubling. We did it here through the space to here. That's the entire first shape. Then the diagonal cuts through and touches a reference line here. So we'll call those reference points. And this is our reference line. So let me go ahead and make that clear, actually. I'll continue that. Make sure we understand this is our reference line. Okay. Now we're going to do it in space. In perspective, I'll go ahead and make boxcars going this way. So I'll do them this way. Okay. Actually, I'll lighten these up a bit. There. That way we'll have a little depth left without getting too out of the cone toward this vanishing point. Just to imply. There's some this over there. Okay. All right, we're going to do these boxes this way from the flat work down here. Sharpen my pencil a bit. Anyway, that's what we're going to do. So again, by considering the entire shape and its space, to get to the second shape and its space, then to get to the third space and its shape. So let's go ahead and figure out what we think this is in perspective. So if we think the boxcar is about that long, let's say that's about right. Okay. There's our first standing rectangular car. We'll draw that out. Okay. And I'll go ahead and draw that out as an actual shape. Okay. A little bit of transparency here, just real light, and then disappear so we don't interfere. And then decide how much do we want in the back. Okay, to about there. Okay. Okay. That's our first boxcar, if you wish to think of it that way. And I will continue this line, so we'll go all the way down. Okay, and we'll draw a little bit of the transparent space in here. Kind of let it disappear. Okay. All right. Now we want to create that second space, so I want that space to be about there, let's say. Okay. So I've created the second space now. Same method. There's the beginning of the second boxcar. I'll go ahead and lighten the lines here to make it a little easier with my kneaded eraser. Just a little bit. Leave a ghost. Okay. But that's still a whole shape. We'll go across a little bit to the vanishing point. And I'll come back and connect very lightly back here so I know that I can come back and do that kind of like that. And I'll get really light in the inside. I don't want to interfere with our referencing stuff. So there's the beginning of the second boxcar. And I've got the back of the third, first, I'm sorry. I'll get lighter as we go down. Okay, there's the idea. First boxcar, beginning of second boxcar. All right, so we consider this entire thing the first shape. So we'll do the same exact moves we did. We're considering from here to here, and to here, and to here, the first shape. So I'll lightly X that off because I need to get my middle line. This isn't our middle line yet. That's just the bottom seam of the boxcar. So what I'll do is I'm going to X this off and find my middle spot. Right there. It is very close to that one, but it's not quite the same thing. Ours is a hair lower than that. So I'm going to make that clear by a darker halfway point line. There. There. That goes all the way back into space. It's very close. That's a coincidence only. So slightly lower is the one we're looking for. Okay. So now we know that to double this entire shape by the little blue beads at the end, you need to go from this corner to the halfway point on this to go into space and get an entire shape that includes the next boxcar in its space. Here we go. Through. Okay. So that's foreshortening pretty quick. Remember, I'm drawing the beginning of the next boxcar just for the heck of it. But now we have to go back and make our reference point to understand how to do that. Okay? So here we go with our diagonal. Let's get back to this and say where our diagonal comes across from when we X'd, right? It's critical we now look at where that diagonal, just like here, crosses where we want the end of the box, or we see that it crosses the first time that we made this box in the space. We have to make a reference point right there. That's where that diagonal strikes the first time the box we already made. So we already made this first box and the space. That was a random decision, so they've been constructed together. They must be made first because you have to have an existing shape and its negative space to consider it an entire shape on its own. Anyway, very simply, you make that, and then we're going to cast that back into space toward our vanishing point. Bingo. Right there. I'll draw it a little more and we'll go into space like that. That's our reference line again. Okay. And that's our RP. Okay. That's how we knew how to get to this reference line, by the way, was because we take note of the RP. So the reference point comes first, then that is cast back. We didn't know where to put the red line back to the VP on the right till we had our reference point from this diagonal going kitty corner for this whole shape. That struck that plane that we drew for our original box. So it's a simple kind of on-object reference point, as we'd like to call it. Anywho, okay, now we've got the entire length of the second box and its space like this. So I'll go ahead and circle that very lightly in blue, again, so we just make sure we understand that. When I take a diagonal now through my second total shape, make sure that's correct, I take note again where that diagonal strikes the red line. That becomes our second RP. And I simply draw down where I know the end of that second boxcar is because of the reference point. It's fairly simple when you start, and it's real clean. It's a lot less than putting a whole bunch of references on the ground for doing this method and then going to the horizon line. It creates about 3 times the work. So I just prefer this kind of stuff for windows and all that stuff. So there's my second boxcar. I'll take my kneaded eraser like I've done before, tap out the middle space just a bit. I'm going to draw the corners of my back car a little bit till they come back like this, like that. Draw my second car over to here, come down a little bit, just a little bit, let it disappear. The front corner come here. So that's the back corner of the first box like that. There's the second box. Just want to make sure that's nice and dark and obvious. That's the end of the second box. That's the beginning of the third box. So let me go ahead and accent these a little bit if it's a little confusing. To make it clearer, I'll just make my outside shapes darker, not the interior, so it becomes very clear what our exterior shape is, having a little heavier line weight. Okay, we get out of the camera here. All right. Those are my actual boxes. So we still have a little bit of ghosted lines in between. There's my third box idea. We'll get to that in a second. Just wanted to accent this to make it a little less confusing. Okay. There. Okay. Oh, make sure these are a little heavier too. Good. Okay. There's my third box starting there, so I'll lightly go over across to here and imply that those come together in that space. Okay, so there's the back corner of my third box. Anyway, we're still considering this the entire shape. So now we need to do this mark again so we can come kitty corner from here through here to create another full box and its space. So that's what I need to do with my red. Get a little sharper red here. Okay, top corner through the half. This is just the standard Xing we've done before. Okay. Arrow. If I didn't make that clear enough, I'll make that one again. Arrow, the first one. Okay. That now marks the back of the second car and its space, both. So that's actually the beginning of the fourth car I'm drawing now. We'll fill that in later because I have to come back with my diagonal just like I did here, just just like I did here, just like I did here, just like I did here, to get and hit the reference line, okay? Okay, there we go. And where that diagonal hits my reference line, that's where I get the back of the third car. And I'll go ahead and make the spaces that space in between a little lighter. If I need an eraser, just tickle it away a little bit. There. And I'll just set myself up for an easier time when I draw in my back of my third car here. Okay, there it is. There's the little corner of the fourth. I'll draw a little bit of transparency in here, going across, going across. Okay, and then I'll go ahead and make it obvious what the fourth car continues like we did up here. I'm not going to finish it. I'm just going to make it obvious that it continues on. And you could go on and on and on with this method. You could reverse it and add stuff to the front too, obviously, by continuing the reference line forward and just doubling the space again, considering this entire thing as space. And then again, you'd consider this entire next one as space too. There and there. Oops, sorry. I'm on camera, I forgot. Okay, so our original rectangular box completely made up on its own, and then again by referencing, doubling, halving, and considering the entire box and its negative space as shape. Xing, doubling, then using the crossing of the diagonal to get the reference point the first time, or to recognize where it is by driving that line back. Wherever that line crosses the subsequent diagonals, that's where you put your reference point. Let me put my third reference point in there, right there. Would be RP, that would be our last one, and then somewhere out there would be the next, okay? So I'll go ahead and shade in the first box to let everybody know in the future that this is was our first box established randomly going to the two vanishing points. Okay. Just like our first, okay, there's our first box, right? But then I have to also indicate that this first space was also considered, but I'll make that a little lighter. It's like an add-on, but it is part of it, and I'll make that a little deeper in the front box just to separate it a little, the idea of it. But it was, in fact, the entire space. It's the entire space where the blue circles are in the corners, even though we know there's a space in between the box. So I'll go ahead and make that darker again. Okay. So again, to remind you, this is not only a boxcar, a space, a boxcar, a space, a boxcar, a space, a boxcar. It could also be, you know, the negative space of an arch, and then the pillar, arch, pillar, arch, pillar. Or it could be window, space between window, window, space between window, window, space between window. And you could move forward with it too by just reversing and continuing the logic in the other direction and the reference line in the forward direction. So again, flat work shows the same as the perspective work. So I think that's everything. So I would just call that not only using the Xing method with doubling and halving, but I'd also then add on, we used an on-object reference point to get that back edge of the boxcar each time, as we did. Got it the first time, referenced it the second time, third time, fourth, fifth, on and on. Okay? All right. So that's it for this one.